All right. Welcome back, group leaders, for the spring semester of this ministry year. We have just finished Revelation, which was certainly some intense, heavy lifting for you guys, and you guys did such a great job doing that. This semester, we're going to take it a little easier on you. We're going to look at the book of Matthew, which is the first of the four gospels that we'll find in the New Testament. Matthew is the most quote unquote Jewish of all the books in the Gospels of the four Gospels: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Matthew wants to give us a very unique perspective into the life of Jesus, taking a very a Hebrew approach. So we're going to be asking you to put your kind of Hebrew glasses on quite often as we walk through these stories together. And so the book of Matthew opens with a genealogy, which is a very Hebrew thing to do. And a genealogy, upon first reading, can look pretty boring. And that's not even necessarily wrong because it is just a long list of names. And we could see it as a long list of names if that were the intention. But what we know about genealogies as they appear in Scripture, in Genesis 5 and in other areas, is that it would be the equivalent of a resume kind of in modern day. A genealogy, someone's family history, really showed why they were suited for the job they were given. And so this genealogy of Jesus is really showing a direct line from Abraham, the first one called by God out of the land of Ur into the promised land, promised that there would be a promised land given to him and a people given to him, all the way through David, who was also promised or given a covenant, as we see in Scripture, that there would be one from his line who would reign forever. And so this genealogy is actually this messianic story of the life of Jesus. It is giving us the credentials that Jesus has to be the Messiah, which means the anointed one or the king of Israel. He would be the forever king, as Fleming Rutledge says. He's the once and the future king that is coming to Israel to reign and to rule and to restore Israel as the people of God. Now, obviously, we know that Jesus doesn't come to restore Israel in the way that the Pharisees or maybe other Israelites are wanting him to. He doesn't come back wielding mighty political power. He comes back as a servant. He comes back as a sacrifice. He comes back as an atonement. And nonetheless, he still comes back as a king, which we saw in Revelation, that Jesus does reign and rule over all. We see that in Hebrews 1, that Jesus reigns and rules over all. And so this is Matthew lining up for us why Jesus is the rightful heir to the throne of Israel. And so this family tree is chock full of names that are a little peculiar and really unlikely. The names that are included in this, from Abraham to Isaac to Jacob, you got Aminadab in there. We don't know much about him, but what we do know is that those who are mentioned on purpose. And so, for a genealogy to mentioning Abraham is a good thing because Jews love Abraham. Mentioning Rahab is a weird thing that you would include a woman in a genealogy. It includes Bathsheba. It includes Ruth. It includes Jacob. They would have loved Jacob, but Jacob was a scoundrel. Um, it includes the good kings and the bad kings of Israel. And so what Matthew is wanting us to see is that Jesus doesn't shy away from his family history, and it is a testament to the faithfulness of God that even through, maybe even especially through the most unlikely of people, we get the most unlikely of saviors. That Jesus would be born in the manner into which he is born, born to a virgin, born to a carpenter named Joseph, who had this really hidden royalty about him that we get to find out. And so the main thrust of the genealogy, we can often get wrapped up in thinking like this is about our own story of shame. And that's certainly not wrong. Uh, but it's important to hold out and to remember that the genealogy is about Jesus being the rightful king. And so as we walk through the guides together this semester, um, asking questions such as, what are your first impressions as you read this genealogy? What are some names that you recognize? What do you know about them? Uh, it would be good to get the group folks talking about Ruth, talking about Rahab, talking about Tamar, talking about Bathsheba, Solomon. There are a lot of names that people will likely know. There are also going to be names that you'll have no clue who they are, and that's okay. But remembering that what we want to find is that even in this scandalous, peculiar, unlikely story of Jesus, uh, he allows us to see that he works in very unlikely ways. And so that is what we're hoping that you'll take out of this big idea, this passage being that Jesus is the promised Messiah from the line of David. He's the promised king. He is the one who, as Matthew writes this genealogy, it's important to remember that there was 400 years of silence before Matthew even wrote these words. And so at the closing of the Old Testament and the opening of the New, God had been silent for a really, really long time. And Matthew chooses to write down these words to break the silence of God by saying, Jesus is here. Jesus has come. The king is here. And this is how we know that he's the king. All the way back, chasing the thread, all the way back to Adam, the promised seed in Genesis chapter 3, the promise given to Abraham that he would have many descendants on the earth, the promise given to Noah that God would never destroy the earth through a flood, the promise given to Moses, the promise given to David that Jesus would, or that one would come from his line who would continue his throne forever. Jesus is the culmination of all his promises. Jesus is the culmination of all scripture. And so as we enter into another semester together, let us hold that out in front of us. Let us always keep that as sort of the main thing as we are guiding our groups this year. That Jesus is the promised king who has come to establish a new kingdom among us. And as we work through that motif, as we work through that theme in scripture, if we hold that in front of us and let that be the lens through which we view all that we're going to read and all that we're going to do, Matthew will really come alive. Chad Bird, theologian that I love, says that Matthew is the Old Testament with wings. And so we're going to see how the Old Testament comes alive in the person of Jesus and in the writings of Matthew, who was a tax collector. He was a sellout. He worked for the government. He would have been almost the lowest of the low. He would not have been a well-loved man because he would have obviously charged taxes from the Jewish people to pay to Rome, and they didn't like people that did that. We'll see that, which is why Matthew even records the account of Jesus eating with tax collectors and sinners. Matthew was talking about himself. When the Pharisees come in and say, who is this man who eats with tax collectors and he eats with sinners? Matthew would have been at that table. This would have been a huge deal for Matthew to have Jesus care and stand up for him and call him to follow him. So we're going to see what this beloved disciple has to say about the person and the work of Jesus this semester. We're so thankful for you. Again, if you have any questions at all, you can reach out to myself, reach out to the group's director at your congregation with any questions that you might have. We're here for you. We want to make your groups flow and move and work well. And so we're thankful for you. The other videos won't be as long as this one. And so, yeah, let's dive in together.